is an older poem, probably from the early 90s. And I was watching, I think it was a Nova episode, and it was all about the mind. It was really interesting. And one of the experiences they had was a musician who had, I don't remember if he had a stroke or if he had a brain injury of some sort. And the result was that the part of his brain that held memories was pretty much gone, to the extent that his wife, who would come into the room, he knew who she was, but it was like he hadn't seen her for years, and then she just came back into the room, and he would fall in love with her every time he saw her.
Oh.
And I was just amazed. I was thinking about how that must be emotionally, that, I haven't seen you, where'd you go? I haven't seen you in years, oh my God. And he was a musician, and he'd been a classical pianist. And they would set him down in front of the piano, and they'd say, do you know what this is? And he's like, no, never seen that before. Do you know how to play it? No, I don't know how to play this. And he put his hands on it, and he would start playing Chopin. And afterwards he would shake, and so obviously there's different parts of the brain responsible for different parts, different types of memories. Just really kind of got my attention. Letter to a musician who has lost the ability to remember. This will be lost to you the moment you read it, and brand new to you the next. The cup of coffee you sip is newer to you than the first brew tasted by English explorers. Your own journal is a new book forged by a stranger. The block letters, I love Deborah, are a stranger's lost graffiti. When Deborah appears, she has been absent for lonely years, and your floating heart bursts with each new sight of her. 5 times today, you have fallen in love. The damaged lobes in your head drift far from what drives you. The unfamiliar keys of the grand piano, white suspended in black lacquer, black keys in white, sing like spheres at your hand's rote command. The instrument chimes, a fluid player piano, the silent roll unfurls from your brain. Each note, something small and clear, something shining, appears for a moment, sings, and moves on into your dark machine. Hey, welcome. You guys reading? Awesome. This poem kind of got me in trouble a little bit. It's based in 1620. I was reading about the early Pilgrims and the things they went through, and I was really interested in this one character that I sort of decided to focus on, because people would die, and you remember reading your history, American history, people going through the dying time and the starving time and all this stuff. And sometimes they would just take them out and set them someplace away from everybody else and kind of wait for them to die. And they were also worried that the Patuxet Indians were going to be constantly attacking them. So they figured what we'll do with some of these people is we'll take them out and sit them like up against a tree, facing where we think the Indians are going to come from. And we'll give them an old musket, and we'll just kind of have them sitting there, and they will have died, but they'll look like they were a sentry. Kind of seems silly that they would think they would kind of fall for that, but that's what they did.
That's brutal.
And so I was trying to get into the head of somebody who would, of one of those people, and being hungry and having succumbed to disease, but thinking of things in the way that those people very much into their own faith would have perceived things. And so what I tried to do with this is to see the speaker kind of perceiving things and kind of slowly starting to imagine things. And you'll notice near the end, one of the Patuxets comes and isn't fooled and takes his musket and his clothes off, and then maybe strangles him, maybe doesn't. It's hard to tell, but he's seeing this in a different way. And I had a journal who was interested in this. It was an early American journal, and they gave it to somebody to read, and she said, "Oh no, this is racist." And I was like, "No, it's not." I was like, "This is what they are saying about the Indians, not what I'm saying about them." But anyway, they didn't publish it. A dying pilgrim is placed in the woods. Patuxet, 1620. On the 49th day, it pleased the Lord that my lungs should fail, and pain pierced like nails to a cross. I had watched Susan succumb and rise to heaven, and John and Isaiah and I left alone, breathing heavily in the log house I had helped to build. Bright blood on my lips, like God's own blood. And Brother William knelt in prayer and held my head all damp. Captain Standish called for the stout lads to carry me into dark woods. One carried me upon his back, I was so light, and the other toted a musket with a broken breech, and they lay me facing west against the base of a cedar. Jeremiah spoke to me there. Nestled in the cedars, how will you groan when pangs come upon you, pangs like a woman in childbirth? And I said, let me not suffer, or if I should, let it be like Christ on the cross, that I may gain his favor. My boned back felt the bark of the tree like thorns, but I could not move, weary as I was. The young men tied the musket to my hands, pointed it to where the savages might come. Tied with the red ribbon, where they got it, I knew not, so I might in death seem like a sentry. There where I rested, we found bones of Indians blanched white in the sun, their skulls, and a voice said, this is Golgotha, place of skulls. And then the voice sang part of Psalm 92, the righteous man will flourish like the palm tree, he will grow like a cedar in Lebanon, planted in the house of the Lord. And tears came down my pallid cheeks, while snow settled on the green limbs of cedar, and a single flake fell in front of my eyes, and then was lifted toward heaven. Cold came then, like a spirit of the Lord, and I breathed less and less, not even coughing, and the snow fell upward, and I thought I was dreaming in Lebanon. The woods grew quiet as winter and prayer. Only a bird called my name in Susan's voice, and the cedars in front of me arched like a church in Leyden. I knew I was passing into the holy realm. An angel of the Lord walked toward me, silent as an owl, his face of bright copper, and feathers of angel's wings rose from his head. You see the description, you know who actually is coming, right? He took the red ribbon from my bound hands and placed the musket in his arm. He removed my doublet that I might meet God as I was born. He held my head in his warm hands, and I was a pure white snowflake rising to heaven. Yeah, they thought the savage thing was me saying savage. It was like, no, that's what the pilgrims.
You racist.
There's a little bit of sort of dementia in this poem. This is called the Revolver, and as I mentioned with when this book came out. It was about my dad dying at the same time I was sick, and I wasn't able to go. He lived in Pensacola. I wasn't able to go and take care of him at the time because I was just too sick to do so. And so he was a stubborn guy, my dad, and so he went into hospital to have a heart valve replaced. Had some complications from the anesthesia, and checked himself out of the nursing home that he was supposed to be in because he didn't like the food. Terrible crap, he said. Went home, wasn't supposed to be driving, drove anyway, had a stroke at some point, went back to the nursing home, checked himself out again, eventually died of a heart attack. But the second time he went home, my uncle went over to his house to get some clothes and whatever, and found his revolver there. And so this is called the Revolver. The second time they took my father to the hospital, Uncle Tony called from Dad's trailer. His .38 is here in the bedside table. It's loaded. What do you want me to do? Take it home with you, I told him. He'll be mad as hell, he said. You can tell him I told you to, I said. And so Uncle Tony took my dad's pistol home, and my father died a week later, alone, on the floor of his trailer, peacocks strutting outside the door, none of the people he imagined actually there, and I 400 miles away. At the nursing home, he refused his therapy, wouldn't eat the tasteless crap they brought him. When the nurse came to his house to check his incisions, he sent her away. I couldn't imagine an old rooster like him asking people to do things for him all the time. And when I think about him dying, I don't think about the crushing in his chest or the pain shooting up his arm. I think about how lonely he must have been in those last moments when he searched for that nickel-plated revolver and had to wait for that old hag of a world to take him in her own time. This is kind of altered mental state. When I was in Albania, it was my Fulbright. I taught at the University of Tirana, not Toronto, Tirana. Albania was a communist state after World War II up until about 1988, I believe. And Enver Hoxha was the dictator there. He was originally a partisan, a communist partisan, fighting against the Nazis. And then after the war came to power, worked with the Russians. He decided the Russians weren't quite pure enough. Then he started working with the communists. He decided the communists weren't quite pure enough as far as communism went, and then ended up kind of creating his own state. And he actually, if you remember the U2 song, Where the Streets Have No Names, originally there the streets didn't have any names. And when we were there were still some streets that didn't have names, which made getting around interesting. The Albanian word for street is ruga. And something that happened at night, all the cafes and everything would close at like 11 o'clock or so. And all the dogs would start barking at like 11:30 every night. And these were dogs that lived on the street. And what they did is they went ahead and they picked up all the dogs off the street. And if they were dangerous and they threatened anybody, they would kill them. And if they weren't dangerous, they would just sterilize them and leave them back on the streets. So you'd see all these little dogs sleeping in, landscaping and stuff here and there, never bothered anybody. And they would just start barking at the same time every night, like somebody flipped a switch, or they're like, oh, it's 11:30, time to bark. And then they would all stop at the same time. It was weird. So, dogs in Tirana. By 11, all of the streets are empty. The cafes closed on weeknights, and I can look out my balcony down Ruga Andon Zako Kayupi and see only the lamplit streets of Hosha's locked down age. Then one of the plain brown dogs you see sleeping in the landscaping of a shop or a stadium during the day walks out into an intersection 3 blocks away. She looks down each street. She calls out in a bark. 3 blocks further, a bark comes in reply. Then another, closer. Then even further away. All of the dogs that have been captured and sterilized and let back onto the streets to live between people call out to each other, telegraphing all down the city what they cannot say during daylight. I would translate it for you, but there is no translation. They call, they respond, each bark different, the same, maybe a mention of something that happened today, that will happen tomorrow, the warmth coming, the cold coming, where to find food. Or maybe it is like bells tolling or muezzin calling. They fall silent as if an agreement has been reached, or maybe there is no more to say, or the song has ended, or they feel a certain chill of midnight, except for the American on the 3rd floor who joins late and doesn't understand where to stop, when to stop. Two more poems. When I was in graduate school, I went to Florida State, and during the summer, we were fortunate to house sit for one of my professors. And his wife was going through some of the mid stages, I guess, of Alzheimer's disease. And we went over there and brought our cat over to make sure they would get along with their cats, and she would be asking, is that my cat or is that your cat? And so we got to kind of hear different things that happened with them. This poem references something called Pecky Cypress. Does anybody know what that is?
Yeah.
How would you describe it?
It looks like worms have eaten into it, but they haven't. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a kind of cypress that sometimes people use. In the past, have used to build houses. Sometimes they'll build decks and things with it now. But yeah, it's got these voids into it, and you look at it and you're like, oh, that's all rotted out. But it's actually not. It's just the way it is. Okay. Pecky Cypress. I like to imagine that you're up late at night too, sitting on a sofa downstairs and reading a book whose words are worth yours. That the house is quiet and Carol is peaceful, and for a moment you can be yourself again, as things were when she was drawing and you were writing and the house seemed a living thing. When Carol scraped paint from the living room beams and her tool pierced deep into a void, she feared at first termites or rot, but found then Pecky Cypress and made trip after trip to the hardware store for paint remover while the children were at school. Through the fumes, the beams emerged and the house began to remember itself. Volunteer palms and live oaks reached up and surrounded the clapboard and tile floors. Now the knocking from above is not the pounding of little one's feet, and the house has to be told over and over what it is made of. Spooky how a cloud came over the sky.
I thought that was just me.
So it's from same situation. It's called The Museum. Last poem. The Museum. These rain-dark roads lose the memory of their shapes on my older eyes, blur fog lines and asphalt, shoulder and gravel. I've been to a museum with an old friend today. I've known him for 40 years, and I've taken him out for the day so his daughter can cut her hair and listen to what the old house she grew up in has to say, just to her. He doesn't remember where he was yesterday, but I remind him and he orders chicken curry. He knows he likes Pinot Grigio. We plan to visit the Impressionists with their fuzzy lines and muted colors, but Impressionism is apparently closed on Mondays. So we walk through the Western Museum. In the atrium, a huge sculpture, a muscled mountain lion, attacks a shirtless hunter with a drawn bow. There are landscapes of paintings and horses and cows and covered wagons. A little movie tells us that the paintings help us to remember all of what happened with cowboys and Indians and women travelers and animals from that time. These things happened, the museum says, even if we don't remember. I drive home in the dark and think that my friend won't remember what we did this day. I wonder how much he remembers of me as his student. He remembers that my daughter scampered around his house as a toddler and played cello for him for 10 birthdays. Does it matter if he forgets what we did yesterday and only when he sees me remembers that I am safe and comfortable and that we love each other? The porch light shines brightly as I pull into our driveway. I see you on the couch between our old lamps and remember our own 40 years. Albania, Venice, England, Cozumel. The illnesses, arguments, our daughter being born, the recitals and dresses and tears, our lovemaking and the secret things I won't tell here. At the end, will it be okay when the roads glare dark and wet if I forget all of these things, but remember you're the one I feel safe with, if I know somehow that you're the one I love?